The ship's alarms thundered across the steel decks as boots pounded in every direction, but amid the noise, one voice cut through everything, a young SEAL shouting, "Hey, old man. What's your rank?" The laughter from the squad echoed behind him. They thought it was a joke. Just another moment of teasing a quiet janitor who kept mostly to himself. But in the same second, a heavy silence fell. Every admiral on the carrier deck suddenly turned, stiffened, and raised their hands in a full salute, every single one of them. And the young SEAL's grin collapsed into shock as the man he mocked simply stared back at him with eyes that held more history, more pain, and more honor than any uniform on the ship that day. But to understand why the entire upper command of the Navy stood at attention for a janitor, you'd have to go back, and trust me, you'll want to hear every second of this. That if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like this video and subscribe, because stories like this don't just entertain, they inspire. His name was Jackson Hale. Most people on the ship called him Mr. Hale, custodian, or simply Sir. Sorry, wrong hallway. At 48, he moved with the quiet discipline of someone who'd lived a lifetime in silence. He rarely spoke unless necessary and never raised his voice. He cleaned the decks, carried supply crates, fixed equipment that wasn't even his responsibility, and walked with a limp he never explained. No one knew he had a daughter. No one knew he used to be someone else. No one knew the Navy owed him more than it could ever repay. Jackson had taken the janitorial job because it kept him close to the sea, close to the only place that helped him breathe after losing half his world. His wife, Anna, had died 8 years earlier in a car crash while taking their daughter to school. Only their daughter survived. For years, Jackson lived with the ache of being both father and mother, protector and provider, but also the guilt of not being able to save the woman he'd promised forever to. His daughter, Lily, now 12, was the only reason he learned to smile again. She'd call him every night before bed, always asking the same question, "Daddy, are you safe on the ship?" And he always answered, "Always, princess." Always. The SEAL who mocked him, Tyler Brooks, was new, full of confidence, and worshipped by his squad for his strength and boldness. Tyler wasn't a bad kid, he just didn't know what kind of man he was standing in front of. And Jackson never corrected him. Never corrected anyone. He preferred invisibility. It was easier. One evening, during a violent storm, the ship trembled under the assault of massive waves. Equipment toppled, loose cables snapped, and a fire broke out near the lower deck. Amid the chaos, Tyler slipped, hitting the rail and nearly falling overboard. He screamed for help, but the crew was scattered, fighting fires and securing the ship. Only one man heard him. Jackson dropped the heavy toolbox he was carrying and sprinted, ignoring the pain in his injured leg. Rain hammered his face as he lunged forward, grabbed Tyler's arm at the last second, and dragged him back onto the deck. Tyler sat there trembling, his bravado shattered. He whispered, "Why did you?" Jackson simply nodded and said, "Hold on. You'll be okay." That was the moment Tyler started noticing things, the way Jackson moved, too precise for someone untrained, the way he analyzed situations, too fast for a simple janitor, the way the officers quietly respected him, too much for someone with no rank, and the way some of the older Navy personnel glanced at him, almost like they recognized him but didn't dare say it aloud. A few days later, during a joint training exercise, a group of visiting admirals boarded the ship. They were inspecting the deck when Jackson walked by carrying a mop bucket. One admiral froze. His eyes widened. Then he stood straighter. "Commander Hale," he whispered, almost breathless. Jackson looked away. "I'm not that man anymore, sir." But the admirals exchanged looks filled with shock, awe, and something close to guilt. Tyler, who overheard it, felt his chest tighten. "Commander Hale," the name echoed in his mind. Later that night, Tyler dug into the Navy archives. And what he found made his hands shake. Commander Jackson Hale, the legendary shadow of the Navy, the man who led an operation that saved 62 hostages, the man who took a bullet to protect his team, the man who disappeared after the tragedy that killed his wife, the man who refused every medal, every promotion, every ceremony, the man whose classified missions were still whispered about in training halls. Tyler felt sick. He hadn't just mocked a janitor. He had mocked a legend. The next morning came the moment that opened this story, the moment the ship deck fell silent. Tyler was with his squad, joking loudly, when he turned and laughed. "Hey old man, what's your rank anyway?" "Mop commander?" The admirals turned sharply. Their voices boomed like thunder. "Attention! Every admiral saluted, every officer followed, every sailor froze, not for a janitor, but for the ghost of the Navy, for the man who had once saved hundreds but chose a quiet life to save himself. Tyler's face went pale. Shame burned in his eyes. Jackson sighed deeply and whispered, "Please, don't." But the admiral stepped forward, one of them speaking softly, "Sir, you may have stepped down, but your service will never step away from our memory." Word spread across the ship. People began thanking Jackson, offering him respect he hadn't asked for and didn't want. It made him uncomfortable. He'd given enough of his life to the Navy. Now, he only wanted to give the rest to his daughter. Tyler found him later, near the supply room. He stood stiffly, then bowed his head. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know." Jackson placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then learn. You never know what battles someone has fought before you judge them." Tyler swallowed hard. "Can I ask something? Why step away? Why hide?" Jackson stared out toward the open ocean. "Because my daughter needs a father more than the Navy needs a hero." And right then, the ship's intercom buzzed. A voice called, "Mr. Hale, you have a call from your daughter." His face softened immediately. He hurried to the phone. "Daddy, did you eat today?" Lily asked in her tiny, cheerful voice. He smiled. "Of course. Your dad is strong." "Okay. I miss you. I miss you more, princess." He didn't know Tyler was listening from around the corner. Wiping his eyes, from that day forward, Tyler defended Jackson fiercely. He even became like an older brother to Lily, sending her postcards and gifts during deployments. Jackson, who once walked alone, now had people who understood him again, maybe not as Commander Hale, but as a father, a man, a human being trying his best. On the last day of that rotation, the entire crew gathered to bid farewell. Jackson didn't want a ceremony, but the admirals insisted on at least one gesture, not a medal, not a speech, just a salute, one final moment of gratitude. Jackson stood on deck, emotional, trying not to cry. Tyler stepped forward and whispered, "Sir, you taught me more without saying a word than any training ever did." Jackson finally smiled, soft, warm, full of peace. "Take care of them, son. And take care of yourself." As the ship drifted under the setting sun, the waves glowing gold beneath it, the narrator's voice would rise for the viewers watching. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to respect people, to look deeper, to appreciate sacrifice, then hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that inspire. Every like, every comment, every subscription helps us share messages that need to be heard.